Hey everyone, it's Sam here at Model Chili Scale Models, and I know it's been a little while since I uploaded my last video. It's been a bit of a hectic year with lots of personal things going on, and of course now, the world's kind of in turmoil. So I hope you're staying safe wherever you are. Here in New Zealand, we've just started our first day of a minimum of 4 weeks of lockdown, so trapped at home, nowhere to go. Can't even do online shopping. Of course, supermarkets and essential things are still open, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting 4 weeks. And so I'm stuck working from home, and I'm going to try and use the opportunity of a bit of extra time at home to crank some more builds out. Hopefully get the channel back into the swing of things for 2020, and hopefully take some people's minds off all of the world's problems at the moment. So I was just doing a bit of cleaning up and a bit of dusting, and I thought, you know what, I might do a video on all of my Bandai Star Wars figure collection. I've not actually done one of those before, and I thought I would give you guys a chance to see all of my figures all in one place, my thoughts and feelings on each of the builds, and I think there's one figure in here that I've not actually done a video on, so you can probably spot that already if you're familiar with my channel. But yeah, so I'll break them down into various groups, so let's get started. And starting in chronological order, we have the Bandai Clone Troopers and General Grievous, so the Clone Wars in general. Definitely my favourite line of figures that Bandai have ever produced. The clone figures offer just infinite variety in the ways you can paint them up and customise them, so yeah, I've really enjoyed customising all of these. All of these Clone Troopers are all the same kit, by the way, just using different parts, different paints. And as you can see, I've got 6 really distinct and unique figures out of one model kit, so there's definitely lots of room for personalisation. And of course, General Grievous in the back there, a pretty simple figure kit. If you want him to look like Grievous, there's not a lot of customising you can do. Just a bit of weathering and a bit of battle damage, but still, he ends up looking really good and has a lot of articulation. And so, I'll just have a closer look at these. So I started off doing way back, I started off doing 2 kits at once, doing a phase 1 and a phase 2 501st Trooper, but this is a Clone Lieutenant from the Clone Wars. That didn't actually come with any decals for his ranking or insignia on his chest, so I just used some spare decals to make the little dots there, so they're not quite the same colour as the rest of them. That's just because they're actual decals and not paint. I might go back later on and paint over those blue, but hand brushing tiny circles is pretty tricky. And yeah, so I did a little bit of weathering, not too much, because he was probably fairly new to the Clone Wars at this time. There are some slight inaccuracies with how the paint is applied on the elbow pads. I don't think it covers quite that whole area. I think it's just a stripe down there. And the back of his chest back plate, that shouldn't be blue. I just pretty much did the same thing from the 501st. I didn't really use much reference material for this one, so if I was to do this again, I wouldn't paint that back piece. But I'm pretty happy with how the rest of it came out. I painted the grey stripe, the grey strip along the back of the helmet's blue. Put a little red at the top of the fin to indicate the little light that sits up there. And yeah, so just painting the arms and the helmet. Just use masking tape for some of these shapes. Now what I'll do for each of these that I go through, I'll put a link in the description to each of the video builds that I did, so you can go and check out the build in detail. And as with all of the weapons, I just paint them, kind of mix them up between using metallic black paint and gun grey, gun metal with black washes and things, and his hand has just popped out there. So one thing that I'll say straight off is that I don't actually treat these as action figures, mainly because if you start moving them around a lot and start fiddling with them, things start to pop out and pieces come loose, because these are all pushed together kits, there's no glue involved. So I could just start pulling out his arms and limbs and helmet and stuff. It's all pretty loosely held together. So I just treat these as sort of statue model kits. I'll put them in a pose and I'll just keep them displayed like that. Sometimes I'll change them around a little bit, but as far as swapping weapons out and posing them in for different like photos and stuff, I don't really do that a lot. So some of them can be quite fragile because I just build them with the intention of just displaying them in one place. And so, yeah, they're really not a good substitute for action figures, which are usually a lot more solid and durable. And so here's the 501st version. This was definitely the first one that I wanted to build. I remember way back in 2005, all the posters you'd see on the street for Revenge of the Sith had featured the 501st Clone Trooper running towards the camera. So those are my sort of favourite memories from that time. And as before, I just used masking tape to build up all of these coloured patterns. Painted straight onto the white plastic. So that's just the colour of the plastic you see there of the white. The only painted piece is the blue, and then of course all of the weathering on top. And then coated in a semi-gloss clear varnish, so that protects the paint and all the weathering, and gives it a nice kind of shiny finish that you definitely see in the movie. The Clone Wars TV series, they've gone for a really matte finish, but in the movie they were pretty much this shiny. So I've definitely based these on the movies rather than the TV show. And again for the blaster, the same metallic black with a black wash and a few silver highlights. And this one is really sort of itching for action. And weathering up these painted areas was probably my favourite part of doing these builds. I'll just paint the blue onto the plastic, and then using a toothpick, just gradually scrape away the paint to reveal the white underneath, and that's how I get the scratches. And then with a thin brush, I just brush over black over the top of that to get a nice multi-layered weathering appearance. And this was the first major customization that I did for a Bandai Clone Trooper. It was the Bandai Clone Shock Trooper, or Coruscant Guard. And what I did for this one is used a mould of the Jango Fett Black Series figurehead and just stuck it on there. What I did was I went on eBay and just looked up Jango Fett head, and there was a seller that was selling casted resin heads for only a few dollars. I think it was from China. But they disappeared soon after, so I've had a few people ask where I got it, and I've told them it was on eBay, but the seller no longer exists, and actually quite hard to find now, so I'm not sure where you can get these now. So yeah, so I just painted that up and used a bit of epoxy resin to mould the neck piece. So there's no articulation on the head, it's all very, very solid. And of course the helmet doesn't fit over the top because that's just the head of the head of the kit, so it's just solid in the middle. What I might do to really finish this off is just get a bit more epoxy putty and just cover that up there and just paint it black, just to make it look a little less like a robot's head or a model kit. And that just sits in his hands there. I'm really happy with how the helmet came out. It was a lot of tedious masking. I just used really, really small strips of masking tape all down there and around his chin, and then sprayed on red, and then just used a toothpick just to clean it up a little bit, make it look a bit more straight, and used the chipping and the weathering to cover up any sort of wonky lines and things like that. So you kind of get the impression of nice even lines, whereas actually if you looked at it really closely they probably aren't. And yeah, so definitely 99% of the time was masking and 1% was painting, but the effect is really, really worth it. Yeah, I'm really happy with how the paint came out on the the armour as well. It's nice and bold and bright, and works pretty well for this figure. So next is probably the biggest job I've had doing a clone trooper. Commander Gree, of course. And again, using the same kits, just completely painted up. There's not much white left on this actually. I think just the helmet fin along the top. That's the only unpainted piece. And I spent a lot of time over screenshots and stills from the movie and action figures and Hot Toys figures and sideshow figures, and just to get an accurate paint scheme, because it's quite difficult to get a definitive source on how his armour actually looks. Every single figure and every single reference seemed to be slightly different, so I mainly just stuck to screenshots from the movie, which were slightly blurry and different lighting conditions and stuff, so it may not be 100% accurate, but I was really, really pleased with how it came out. The helmet was a mix of silver, light greys, fluorescent green for the visor, darker green for the top, and then just a bit of white along the rim there. And then of course a bit of chipping and weathering. Managed to get a slight 3D effect on the chest for some extra weathering. And for the braces I just used strips of masking tape painted, so it's really thin and it conforms to the body. So again, it's probably not that durable. If I start fiddling with this a lot, it will probably come loose and come off. So it's mainly just used for display purposes. And for the backpack, I just cut up some sheets of styrene and just sort of constructed this up from scratch, and then just used a rod of styrene for the antenna and just sharpened off the edge. And this extra thermal detonator canister was from a Stormtrooper kit that I had spare, that used for spare parts, so that was from there. So it's slightly different to the clone one. It's slightly bigger, but it'll do. And for this thigh pouch, again, was just a block of styrene that I sanded and shaped down, put a little round piece on the top, and again masking tape for the strap around his thigh. And yeah, it seemed to be quite simple in theory when I was planning it, but it took a lot of work. I'll put a link in the video, as I said before, so you can see just how much work and sort of stress it involved building this. It was quite a task. It took many hours of sweat and tears, but I got there in the end, and I'm really, really happy with how it came out. It's definitely one of my favourite of all of these builds. So next up we've got Clone Commander Wolffe, and this was a figure kit that was modified using a cast resin helmet, 3D printed blaster holsters, and what else did I do on this? Oh yeah, just a scratch built antenna for his shoulder pad there. And for the helmet I also removed the rangefinder thingy and replaced it with a strip of styrene just to make it more thin and a bit more realistic, because this was again cast from a Black Series figure helmet, and that was really thick, so I just thinned it down a little bit. And for the Karma, that was just craft foam, so it's not cloth or material or anything. I just basically wanted it to look as flat and as straight as possible, and that was just attached behind the belt pieces there. Oh yeah, and the blaster pistols are 3D printed as well, and they actually fit into the holster. Yeah, where did I get all of these extra parts? Well, quite a while ago, one of my viewers very kindly sent me a box full of their unused clone kits and extra pieces they'd bought off the internet or 3D printed. So that was a very generous gift, and I just ended up with loads of spare customised parts. I'll put some links in the description where you can find some of these pieces now on the internet, but I don't actually have first-hand experience buying these, so I'm not usually the expert on where you can find all these cast and 3D printed bits. But I'll have a bit of a search around to see if there's anything still available. And so the helmet was mainly just hand painted. It was sort of the yellowish resin colour, so I sprayed it white and then hand painted over all the blue details. It came out pretty well. It's not 100% accurate or clean, but the good thing with these clones, you can do weathering and chipping and all sorts of little things just to sort of mask the uneven lines and shoddy brushwork. But yeah, pretty happy with how that came out. And hand painted the little wolf symbol on the shoulder pad. The two symbols there. Actually no, when I say hand painted I mean hand scraped. So I painted it blue straight onto the plastic, and then using a toothpick I just scraped away the pattern from the blue. So it was done by hand, but not with a brush. And yeah, so it was a lot more simple to construct this than Gree. Basically all I needed to do was just paint up the helmet and then just add all of the extra bits. And the painting was pretty straightforward. And yeah, so quite happy with how that one came out. And so the last clone figure that I've done so far is the 212th Airborne Division from Battle of Utapau. Now this again used a custom helmet, 3D printed shoulder ammo cartridges, and everything else was scratch built. I scratch built the satchel just using piles of sheet styrene. I think it was about 3 or 4 layers. Just glue them all together and then sanded off, rounded off the edges. Used a half layer for the lid flap, and then just attached it using, again, masking tape, a thin strip of that. And the grenade canisters, or whatever these are, they were just bits and pieces I had in my spare junk pile, just from various kits over the years. Just found 3 roughly cylinder shaped bits. Actually, nice, yeah, I do remember now where they came from. It was these spare bits from these blaster rifles, this little canister that he's holding here. All of the these rifles that I haven't used on other kits. I cut 3 of those out and just sanded them down to make those 3 round canisters. Sometimes it takes a bit of memory jogging to remember where I get half of these bits. And yeah, so there was just a lot of fine sort of masking tape application there for all the different straps and buckles, and the this pad here, which I know now is far too small for what it actually should be. It should be quite a bit bigger. That was just sheet styrene, just cut out and sanded to shape. I may remove that and replace it with a bigger one. All of this, all of these straps and stuff are just stuck on using white glue, so they're held in place, but a bit of force you can pull them off without too much damage. So I might pull that off later on and replace it. And again, the caramel was made using craft foam, just spray painted with an airbrush, the tan colour, and then scuffed up a little bit. Just various bits of masking used for the paint stripes. And as the same with Commander Wolffe, I hand painted the helmet. So again, just sprayed it white, and then hand painted on the orange details. So the white is slightly different white to the rest of the kit. Doesn't show up too much on camera, but in real life it is kind of more of a warmish tone. Because the white of these Clone Trooper kits, this white, is very pure and very bright. It's very hard to replicate that with paint. But yeah, overall, yeah, again, really happy with that one. Yeah, despite the slight inaccuracies of some of the straps and the pads, it still makes quite a nice, impressive display piece. And finally, General Grievous. So there wasn't really much customizing to do on this one. Basically all I did was just make a few gashes and scrapes in the headpiece there. And what I did for the eyes was, after I finished doing the semi-gloss coat over these pieces, I went in and put some white glue blobs in the eyes just to make them extra shiny. And so they weren't painted, that's all the colour that came in the kit. It's all pre-painted. So you just got to weather it up a little bit. And it comes out looking pretty much like General Grievous. The only thing I did paint was some of the internal organs in his chest cavity there, which are really hard to see now. And a bit of weathering on the legs and a bit of battle damage, a bit more chunks taken out of his shins and stuff. And of course I painted up the lightsabers, just the handles. Pretty easy job. And he does come with replacement attached arms and a big cloak. But he's super articulate, you can put him in so many different positions. But again, his joints do tend to pop out now and again, so it can be a bit tedious trying to put him in different poses. So that's it for the Clone Wars. Let me know which one is your favourite, or which one you think I've done the best job on, or the worst job on, even. As I said, it's definitely my favourite subject of all of the Bandai figure kits. But sadly, they've just become really hard to get. I think Bandai have stopped producing the clone kits, and they just go for crazy prices online now. So I probably won't be getting any more in the near future, unless Bandai decides to re-release them. So I'm a bit sad about that. I do actually have 2 unfinished clone kits from the generous gift package that I got, so I will be doing some more clone builds in the future. I haven't quite finally decided who I'm going to make yet. I think Commander Bly is high on the list, but we'll see. So keep an eye out for those. And so now we'll move on to the Empire. Alright, so a bit of a smaller collection. And starting off with this Stormtrooper, which was the first figure kit that I ever did. Which is basically a left-handed Stormtrooper. Just really, really mucked up. He's been behind enemy lines for months, in the mud and the dirt. And yeah, so this was just a chance to have some fun. I didn't want him just all shiny and clean, so I just went to town just with the washers and various pigments and just lathering it all over him. Just added a little bit of flair with the his kill count on his wrist there. I'm not going to imply how we drew those on. Ewok blood, maybe. But it's interesting though, because when I first did this build, I had quite a few comments of people saying, "Oh, he's too dirty, Stormtroopers are not that filthy, you went too far with the weathering," and things like that. But since this build, we've had movies like Solo and Rogue One and now The Mandalorian, and in all of those we've had really dirty Stormtroopers. So I kind of feel vindicated now that we've seen a lot more of these types of filthy Stormtroopers on screen. So that's that's kind of nice. But still, this guy's really, really mucked up. But it was a lot of fun. Let's get a closer look here. For some reason it looks like he's really has no neck. He's really sort of squat down there. I think it's just the kit. His neck is quite short for some reason. And yeah, the weathering is all sealed in with a flat coat I used for this one, so it's all nice and protected. And not a single shiny bit on him. And as you can see, once you do a lot of painting on these figure kits, because the parts are so tightly pushed together because they don't need glue, then you get quite a bit of scraping when you start articulating them. So you can see down in the ankle, part of the paint and the weathering has started to scrape off. Which is inevitable. You can't really stop that from happening unless you just don't move them at all and just glue it all together. So again, that's another reason why I don't really treat these like action figures. I don't want to move them too much because some of these figures that have got a lot of paint work on them, you kind of risk scraping that paint away. So the second figure that I ever did was the Stormtrooper from Rogue One. And really not much to say about this one. I did it pretty standard. Just painted them up, put the decals on for all those different markings, did a bit of weathering and a bit of scuffing, and just left it at that really. Came with a cloth karma. I attempted a little bit of a beach scene on the base. That was just using sand and dirt pigments, just glued onto the base there. It's still a bit loose. And yeah, it's not my ultimate favourite Stormtrooper figure. Design, I should say. But yeah, it was quite a nice figure. I still have yet to get a Death Trooper, so this is the only sort of Rogue One figure that I've got. And I forget which one this is. There's like 3 different variations you can build with the kit of different ranks. I forget which one this is. Yeah, moving on to the Imperial Stormtrooper from Star Wars Battlefront. I actually did this before I did the Clone Stormtrooper, so I used this as a little bit of practice as to what colour to use and getting all the sort of shapes through masking and that. So this was a good test run. But this was actually built from a Sandtrooper kit. And so you can see he's got the backpack and the slightly different knee pads from a regular Stormtrooper. That's the Sandtrooper version there, and the normal Stormtrooper one looks like that, so slight difference. Also, the Sandtrooper didn't come with these little pouches that hang down from the belt, but I wanted to include them on this figure. So like before, I just had a Stormtrooper kit that was used for spare parts, so I just nicked one of them, well, these from that kit, and attached them to there. And well, yeah, also the ab section is slightly different as well, so you can see there the slight differences. So when I was building this, I never really realised how different the Sandtrooper actually was to the normal Stormtrooper. So yeah, it was a bit of a learning opportunity there. But yeah, so all the helmet was just done again using masking and a toothpick to scrape away all the inaccuracies and wonky lines, and then to add a bit of chipping. And the backpack wasn't painted, it was just stuck together, weathered up, and then put a flat coat over it. So it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, so it was a nice sort of basic build, quite fun. It's always fun to do these sort of expanded universe Stormtroopers that have a bit more colour to them than just the usual white. And so we come to the figure kit that I haven't actually done a video on. So this wasn't a Shadow Trooper kit, this was actually a normal Stormtrooper kit that I spray painted black. Because at the time the Shadow Trooper kit was really hard to get and really expensive. So I thought, well, it's basically just a Stormtrooper just painted black, so why can't I just do that? And so I did. But I'm just trying to recall the process, because I actually mixed up the painting technique a little bit. So for the main body, most of the body, I did just Vallejo Air, Model Air, black, and then just loads of different coats of gloss to get the really nice shiny plastic black effect. But it wasn't quite working out as much as I'd hoped. So you can see on the thighs there, it's not quite as shiny as I would have liked. So I got a can of Tamiya black gloss spray paint, and I did that on the helmet, and that came out super shiny and black. So you can see a slight difference in the sort of finish. So I'd wish I'd done that on the rest of the kit now, but at least I know for next time that process. And so I just nicked the shoulder pad from the Stormtrooper and used it for this guy. Painted up the helmet details silver. I sprayed the rest of it black. And yeah, that was basically all there was to it, really. There were quite a few little mess-ups with the paint. There's a few marks here and there, but yeah, it could just be weathering. This seam on the back of the helmet kind of annoys me. It's just common to all of these kits. You could probably could have done a better job of hiding that. And yeah, so again, the blaster was just painted up, gunmetal and washed with black. So yeah, that's all there was to that one. Now we come to the Dark Lord himself. So this was the first version of Bandai's Darth Vader that they released. So it doesn't have the exposed helmet, well, the exposed face of Anakin. It has the back of his head, so you can remove that piece there. But they've since re-released this kit to include the front of his face as well, from the final scene of his final scene in Return of the Jedi. And yeah, so there wasn't much painting to do with this one. All of this black on the helmet is just the plastic. Just painted the highlights. The chest piece was mainly a decal over a silver, blackish silver part. And all of the other pieces weren't painted at all. I did various different flat coats, so I did a flat coat on the cape and just semi-gloss for the rest of his outfit, and then gloss for his boots. Did I put a gloss on his boots? I can't remember actually. Go back and check the video and let me know. Sometimes I can't remember how I did these models. But I just know there wasn't much painting involved, except for, you know, obviously the details on his little chest box there, and the lightsaber. And yeah, a lot of people replace the cape with a cloth one, which is understandable because this looks kind of bleh. But I kind of like how it sits on him, and he just kind of sits in the background on the shelf, so it's a nice silhouette at least. And his helmet is probably one of the most accurate molds of Darth Vader I've ever seen. He just looks right. Looks really good. And I actually do have the re-release of this with Anakin's face, so I'll build that up sometime. And it's actually got more of a rubberized single piece cape, so it should look slightly better. But as it goes, it's a pretty cool figure. It's kind of nice and bulky and makes a nice sort of imposing display piece, especially with all the other figures. He helps to keep them in line. So getting close to the end now, we have a couple of odds and ends. So we've got FN 2199 from The Force Awakens, the famous traitor guy. Now this was just a basic Stormtrooper figure from The Force Awakens, and he came with the baton piece. So naturally, I just wanted to do the figure from that scene. The figure couldn't actually hold it naturally in this position, so what I had to do was just get the fist hand attachment and cut off the handle and just actually physically glue it to his fist to make it look like he's holding it in this position. So it was a slight bit of customization, and of course that fist is now fixed to the weapon, I can actually change the handout for another hands, but yeah, I basically just wanted this display piece. And none of it's been painted. The only thing you have to hand paint really is just the white on the black hands. So they've got strange multicoloured gloves. And just a tiny little bit of weathering on the here and there, and on the feet, because he's fighting outdoors, so just a little bit of dust and dirt. And yeah, so that was basically just slapped together, customised the fist attachments and painted up the baton. I'm not a huge fan of the First Order designs. They're kind of a little bit too clean for me. I don't know. It's yeah, I mean they're nice to look at, but yeah, not a huge fan. But it's kind of nice to have a representative of the new trilogy. Anyway, I don't think Bandai have released the Sith Trooper yet, or if they're going to or not, I'm not sure. And finally, we've got a Boba Fett figure kit, heavily customised to make my own unique Mandalorian. And I designed him to be sort of a long-range sniper. So I mixed his Boba Fett's blaster and attached the end of a Stormtrooper rifle to the end of it, and made a custom scope. Custom paint job. Put a thin, I think this is a rubber band, section of a rubber band for the strap. And basically just painted up the rest of Boba Fett. There wasn't much more customization done. I filled in the sort of dent on his helmet. You can just kind of see it just a little bit there. Filled on that dent and filled in a few of the other dents on his armour just to make him a bit more unique. And then yeah, just painted it up different colours. The camouflage effect was achieved just with a little bit of sponge, so I painted it a light brown colour, and then sponged on little green patches to give that random camouflage effect, and then sprayed on some copper. It's copper or bronze? I think it's copper, just for the highlighted bits. And yeah, it wasn't until kind of I finished it that I realised he's kind of similar colour scheme to Boba Fett, with the green and the sort of reddish brown. So if I thought about it a bit more, I probably would have veered more away from Boba Fett, but he still looks pretty different, I think. And I'll put the Mandalorian symbol there, and just used a bit of medical gauze cloth just for his sort of kind of a cape / ghillie suit type of thing that he wraps around himself to hide himself from observers. And so I didn't use his backpack or anything. Yeah, so one really awesome thing that came out of this build is that one of my viewers contacted me and said they'd actually made this gun in real life for their cosplay. And they sent me a photo of it all lit up, and so I'll put up a photo of that now. And so that was really awesome to see that people have been inspired by at least some of my customizing work and made it into real life. So yeah, that was really awesome to see. And yeah, so I think he's one of my favourite figures. Definitely one of the more customised pieces in terms of painting, at least. And yeah, so quite happy with how that one came out. It's really tempting to do more custom Mandalorians, especially now that we've seen loads of them in the Mandalorian. But yeah, these kits aren't cheap, so maybe sometime in the future I'll get another one. I really wish they'd bring out some Jango Fett though. That would be a fun one to do up. And so the last two pieces are the 1/6 scale 12-inch Imperial Stormtroopers. As you can see, I've done a couple of these, and one of them was the just the normal Stormtrooper, and the other one was the Shadow Stormtrooper. So with the basic Stormtrooper, I customize it to look like the Stormtrooper commander from the Force Unleashed video game, and that was basically customized just with the blue pattern. And yeah, struggling to get it on camera actually. Customized with the blue, and it came with decals for the stand, but I just used them on the shoulder pad instead, just for a bit of extra Imperial pimping on the shoulder pad there. And just standard sort of masking, painting and weathering for the rest of them. And yeah, so this was a really cheap alternative to buying something like a Hot Toys figure, which usually costs several hundred, for something that cost about 70 New Zealand dollars, I think it was. And again, they just offer infinite customization options. I'd really love to do a Shock Trooper version of one of these. And there has been some criticism of these kits that the helmets look a little bit too big and the bodies look a little bit too thin. But once you kind of get used to looking at them, it doesn't really become much of an issue. When you first see it, it does kind of look a bit odd, but yeah, I've kind of got used to it over time, and I still think they make really nice display pieces, especially once they've all been customized like this. And for the Shadow Trooper, I didn't really do any customization. I just kept the plastic as it was and just scuffed it up a little bit with some matte black and just some other little bits and pieces just to make him look a bit weathered. And yeah, so that was just another really simple, nice build to do up. And again, it just looks really cool on the shelf. Just to have a couple of figures that at this scale. If I get, I mean, they're twice as tall as a 6-inch figure, but obviously the volume is so much bigger, 4 times as much. So yeah, they really stand out amongst the rest of the figures. But just as you thought it was all over, there's just one more I've got to show off, and that's my little custom BB-8 that I painted up in model chili colours to celebrate my first 1,000 subscribers, which seems like a long time ago now. So this was this is a Bandai kit, and painted up before it was all put together. And yeah, so that was a nice little fun project. Came out quite nice. And yeah, it was the first significant milestone of the channel. Okay, so that wraps up that for now. I hope you've enjoyed that little showpiece. And if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. And as I said before, I'll put links to all of the builds below so you can go check those out in detail. But yeah, happy to answer any more questions that you might have on any of these figures. And yeah, so I hope everyone's keeping safe out there. And I'll get started on my next build, so hopefully that won't be too long. So you can look forward to some content coming up in the near future. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, like and comment and all of that jazz. And thanks for watching. So until next time, take care.